Okay, well, for the interested, I'm going to take the gooseneck arrangement, the steering stem and assembly off the gooseneck, and there's a couple of videos online showing what you need to do to do this, and I'm doing it because the steering stem has started to come away from where it's mounted in there. I'd like to actually explore that in more detail. The various videos, well, the best one, which I often link to on my blog, is from the guys who seem to be related to McCain, because they're Asians. I think Koreans or Chinese, but no. They actually take this completely apart. I don't think that's actually really needed, because mostly it's a clamp. Now that one needs to come out because it actually locates the entire shaft onto the end of the steel stem. So he actually has to come all the way out. But it's not a big deal. So it's a bit difficult to get him back in. You've got to be really careful and look down the hole with the torch and make sure it's all aligned nicely. But once you've, no, that's right, runs out of cable, doesn't it? Once you've got those four loosened off, it's actually pretty easy to just lift the whole thing off, right? And then I can just sit it back there and it's out of the way. And as I mentioned earlier, you've just got these two seals. One's a rubber seal, which is also helpful, and the last one's the final stage dust seal. And I gave him a bit of a good whack in there the other day with the rubber mallet. Now I've got it sat on some egg cartons, but once you give it a whack with the rubber mallet, then that bearing will come out. Make sure that you've got this flange side down when you're putting it back in. And the good thing about the working on the egg cartons is that now supports the entire scoot, and I can pretty easily just lift this up and take the front wheel out. So now it can just sit there out of the way, and the top bearing comes out to have a look. Someone asked me about that recently, so I'll see if I can actually find what it is. But I'm going to try and put a bit of a mark. Quite sure where the camera's pointing to with that. Oh yes, I need to come down a bit more. So I'm going to need to put a mark on the end of the shaft here at the front, just to make sure that I've got it exactly aligned when I put it back on again. So my plan is going to be to use a drill and drill down with the drill press here. But before I can do that, I've got to separate this part from, I might just widen that out a bit more. I've got to separate this part from the rest, which is what I'll do next. Okay, well, I've taken the two sides off and the entire thing apart and got the bearing out of it. Where did the bearing go? Down here. So I'll put the dimensions in the description. Basically, there was an amount of rust on the outside of the shaft, just surface rust, so I just used a wheel on the end of my drill and got that off. So now this will slide on. Now when you put these back together again, the taper bearing, that taper has to go facing up, right, because it's going to go into the bottom of the stem. So now it slides on reasonably smoothly, just a little bit of encouragement, and it gets down there. It's a pretty tight fit. It's not like NASA standard or anything like that. A thing that's always been a bit of a bugbear to me is that the axle has always had too much grease in it, and so therefore I could not actually get the bolts to fit. So basically I'm going to re-grease the insides of these. Just as a quick point, before I get on to anything else, basically these just sit in here like this with the axle, you know, there. So you've got the springs in there, and this is the one of the issues that, you know, I have with this system. It and all systems, the Zero is not any different. It's still got the same problem. Is that there is essentially nothing stopping these guys from doing that, right? You know, which is an old motorcycle problem, because there's no bracing here. Same as the Zero 10X. Oh, the Zero. Oh, but still, it's still got the same problem, that it's only got the axle and maybe two small bolts through here to clamp it all together. Now this one, at least it's a simpler system. But anyway, I'm going to put it all together. Oh, and see the flat surface there. That flat surface actually clamps against the side of the axle to hold it all together, to prevent it from moving. But you know, I think it's not an ideal system. The stem has a little bit of movement, so I'll just re-zoom in on this. So if I grasp this and move it backwards and forwards, you can see that, and you might be able to hear it as well, it's got some movement in there. But interestingly, whatever's let go, it hasn't got much twisting. It's got a little bit, but it's not ready to let go yet. So I'm going to have to actually ride it, because what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually take the shaft out. And the conspiracy theory about the crack there, unfortunately, doesn't hold up, because the crack's a scratch. Never mind. The thing that I'd like to do is actually get it to come out, which I'll have to mark it to make sure that I keep this flat part at the back, which locks it in. And then I can drill a hole that comes out through the bottom as well, and then put a bolt in through there with a nut on the top, and I'll use what's called a nylock nut, which doesn't come undone from vibration. So the next thing to do is to re-grease him and put him back down that shaft there. And I won't need much grease on it. I'll use some good bentonite grease, and that front end should be good for a while longer. Okay. By the way, while I was here, I thought I'd try and demonstrate this particular aspect, that basically the thing that holds these things on is that this is actually square-sided. I think that's as far in as it goes, yes. So you can see that means that when the axle goes to provide power, it can, because it catches in the on the sides of this, so this becomes sort of a spanner, but it's a very loose fit. So I've wanted to measure it quite a few times, so I've got my feeler gauges out here, and so I've got it in there, and I've measured the gap as about 25,000th of an inch. Yes, I know I hate metric, I hate imperial, but what that means is I can then put a caliper over this and get a metric number. But you can see there's a bit of space there. So what I want to do is I want to bend over a flat piece that will act as a shim between the sides of this and that, to just snuggle it up a bit. Now if you look in there, you can see that the thread has been cutting in. Look, obviously it's cutting in at the top here where it's jammed into it all the time, but it's cutting into it at the bottom on this side and the top on that side, and that's pretty normal. Which is one of the reasons why you don't want to have, alloy this and steel that, because it's eventually going to shred there, and that's one of the other reasons why if you've got a super high power scooter, it's going to twist its guts out and get going. So, there's a whole bunch of reasons why these things are better off being lower power, and like 500 watts for this one's plenty. So I'm going to shim that up eventually. Probably I'll do a video on that when I do it. I might reference this bit of video in that. Just thought you might find that interesting. There's the light switch. Okay, so basically I've got the shaft back in. So to do it up, I just put one in each side and just did it up firmly, just finger tight, because I've got thread locker in there. And now these can pivot, and I've put grease in there. You can see a little bit of the bentonite grease popping out down there. I just put it gently on the shaft, but yeah, so that should now work. I'm gonna leave it sit for a while the thread locker does its stuff. I might just put the wheel back on now. But basically it was pretty easy to take the plastic guard off. Interestingly, it even seems to have some little rubber washers, which is a nice touch. Could have been used elsewhere, but basically it just sat on there. So you undid the 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to put a tad of thread locker on those. Maybe I'll see how I feel, because you know they've managed to stay on there all this time without falling off. So maybe they were assembled in a different fucking factory. Who knows? Anyway, so basically now she's just about ready to roll. So as you can see, it's a pretty simple mechanism with the springs in there that just, you know, allows it to come up and down. It's quite functional. I'll be interested to see how long. Let me just zoom out a bit. I'll be interested to see how long that guy lasts now. Okay.